Remmick isn't just a vampire. According to one of the most compelling fan theories, he's a forgotten Irish god or fae, being transformed by colonization and extinction. When Sinners opens with Remmick seemingly falling from the sky, scorched and disoriented, it's not random cinematography. Fans argue this visual choice connects him to Irish mythology, specifically to beings like the Leanin' She, a blood-hungry spirit from Celtic lore who seduces and drains victims. The theory suggests that long before Remmick became a vampire, he possessed the same gift as Sammie, the power to awaken ancestral spirits through music. This wasn't vampirism, but divine resonance, a spiritual ability tied to his people's culture. Then came destruction. British colonization of Ireland, which lasted approximately 700 years from 1169 until 1922, erased his community. His temple fell, his people were killed, and he chose undeath, not to become a predator, but to preserve songs no one else would sing. His vampirism became a form of cultural preservation through the only language he had left: consumption. This reframes every action Remmick takes in the film as the desperate attempt of a dying culture to survive through assimilation of others. The vampires in Sinners represent cultural appropriation and erasure. The most chilling evidence appears when Remmick telepathically forces the entire black crowd at Club Juke to dance to his Irish folk song, Rocky Road to Dublin. This scene isn't just about vampire mind control. In Irish folklore, the Fae could charm mortals into endless dances where victims would twirl until dawn, their bodies claimed by rhythm, sometimes never returning. When Remmick weaponizes this ancient glamour against a community whose music was born from pain and resilience, he's using the same tactics employed by his own oppressors. The hive mind he creates strips away individual identity, forcing everyone to share his memories, desires, and experiences as one collective consciousness. After Remmick bites Bo Chow, he immediately gains the ability to speak Taishanese Chinese, absorbing Bo's entire cultural and linguistic heritage. This isn't just memory theft. It's the systematic erasure of identity the colonizers have employed throughout history. The vampires promise freedom from racism and a colorblind community, but they deliver conformity, control, and the complete destruction of the cultures that made each person unique. The horror isn't the fangs. It's watching people lose themselves entirely. Did Sammie sell his soul to the devil? The post-credits scene in Sinners fuels one of the film's most debated theories. After playing This Little Light of Mine in a church, young Sammie looks off screen and smiles at someone the audience cannot see. Given that Sammie's music has the power to conjure spirits and attract demons throughout the film, many fans believe this performance summoned Satan himself, allowing Sammie to make a Faustian bargain for musical success. This theory draws directly from the legend of Robert Johnson, the king of Delta blues, who allegedly met the devil at a crossroads and traded his soul for supernatural musical ability. Sammie's subsequent fame and 60-year career as a legendary blues musician seem to support this interpretation. However, an alternative theory suggests something more bittersweet. The mid-credits scene shows elderly Sammie telling Stack that death is approaching. If the final post-credits moment depicts Sammie in the afterlife rather than making a deal, he's not performing for Satan, but for his father, Jedediah, the preacher who spent Sammie's life condemning blues music as sinful. In death, father and son finally reconcile through the very music that divided them in life. Sammie gets to do what he loved most, forever, suggesting that despite his earthly sins, his gift earned him a place where music never ends. A fully made crib sits in Burton Jones' house, with no baby in sight. This haunting detail appears briefly when Remmick first seeks shelter from the Choctaw vampire hunters chasing him. The film never addresses it directly, but actor Peter Dramanis revealed to critic Courtney Howard, a writer for Variety, that a deleted scene explained everything. The film originally opened with Bert and Joan discussing their desire to have a child and their inability to conceive. Then Remmick arrives injured and changes everything. The scene was cut during editing, but director Ryan Coogler deliberately left the empty crib in the final film. This choice has spawned one of the movie's darkest fan theories. Many viewers believe Remmick, or the newly turned Burton Joan, killed and consumed their own child. The evidence supports this grim interpretation. Vampires and sinners often leave victims dead or turned, and the crib suggests a baby once lived there. The couple's eagerness to let Remmick in despite warnings from the Choctaw hunters indicates desperation, possibly the desperation of parents who lost a child and saw vampirism as a twisted path to resurrection or reunion. Whether the child died before Remmick arrived or after remains ambiguous, but the empty crib functions as a visual representation of the innocence and future that vampirism destroys. Sinners isn't really about vampires. It's about whiteness as a lurking evil outside the door. Ryan Coogler structures his film so the church bookends the narrative. It opens with Sammie in a church and closes with him there in the post-credits scene. Between these moments, the film explores how Sammie wrestles with his calling to play blues music, while his preacher father calls him a sinner for loving the genre. The vampires serve as a metaphor for white supremacy and colonization. They arrive from outside the black community, promise false freedom, and ultimately seek to erase black identity by forcing assimilation into their collective. Remmick specifically targets Sammie's transcendent musical gift, wanting to steal it for his own purposes, just as white culture has historically appropriated and profited from black art. The film's 5 hidden meanings, as analyzed in The Root, all point toward this central theme. Music connects black people across generations. The vampires disconnect them from their ancestry by overwriting their identities. Coogler visually demonstrates this during Sammie's performance when the camera drifts from 1930s dancers to African-clothed ancestors, to a DJ spinning records, to a guitarist in funkadelic-style clothing. This sequence celebrates black musical lineage. The vampires seek to sever it. The church represents both salvation and damnation, because Coogler respects the institution, but refuses to let black music be chained there, condemned as sinful, when it's actually a form of spiritual resistance and cultural survival. By the way, if you're enjoying this so far, I create videos like this all the time. Subscribing would really mean a lot. Remmick's glowing red eyes came from an animated children's movie. Director Ryan Coogler confirmed in multiple interviews that he drew direct inspiration from Death, also called the Wolf in Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. That character's piercing red eyes represented an unstoppable force of nature, and Coogler wanted the same mythic intensity for his vampire antagonist. The glowing eyes aren't just stylistic. They serve biological and symbolic purposes. Coogler explained that the effect simulates tapetum lucidum, the reflective layer in animal eyes that improves night vision. This detail roots the vampires in predator biology, suggesting they've evolved or adapted to hunt humans more effectively. The red color specifically evokes danger, blood, and hellfire, connecting Remmick to demonic imagery without making him explicitly supernatural in origin. Interestingly, the custom contact lenses used to achieve this effect were notoriously difficult for actors to wear. Haley Steinfeld described putting them in for the first time, saying she couldn't see anything and needed someone to take a picture so she could understand what she looked like. The contacts became a transformative tool that helped the actors embody their monstrous alter egos, creating a physical barrier between their human selves and their vampiric characters. Stack and Mary's survival isn't a happy ending. It's a curse. When they appear in the 1992 mid-credits scene, dressed in contemporary fashion and seemingly thriving, the initial impression suggests they have adapted well to immortal life. They get to experience decades of history, watch their descendants grow, and remain forever young. But Haley Steinfeld's comments about the scene reframe everything. She explained that while vampires can see their descendants grow and experience extended life, they're not really Mary and Stack anymore. They're vampires with their memories. The film demonstrates this during their transformation. Once bitten, they become vicious and selfish, their true natures overwritten by the hive mind. Even when they momentarily snap out of control after Annie's death, showing shock and grief, it's fleeting. The post-credits scene reveals the tragedy of their existence. Stack tells Sammie that the night at Club Juke was the last time he saw his brother alive. the last time he saw sunlight, and the only time he felt truly free. 6 decades of immortality couldn't replace one night of genuine human connection. Meanwhile, Smoke's death shows him reuniting with Annie and their daughter in the afterlife, dressed in white and at peace. Director Ryan Coogler presents real death as heavenly respite, where families reunite. Vampirism, by contrast, guarantees Stack and Smoke's eternal separation. Smoke's decision to spare Stack may have actually denied his brother any chance of knowing peace. Sammie's music doesn't just entertain, it pierces the veil between life and death. Annie's opening voiceover explains that certain people are born with the gift of making music so true that it conjures spirits from both past and future. Sammie possesses this transcendent ability, and the film's most spectacular sequence demonstrates it in action. During his performance at Club Juke, the camera begins with 1930s Black Americans singing and dancing, then drifts to show African ancestors in traditional clothing dancing, then shifts to a DJ spinning turntables, then reveals a guitarist dressed like George Clinton from Funkadelic. This visual journey through time isn't fantasy. It's Sammie's power manifesting, connecting every generation of black musicians across centuries. The guitar he carries throughout the film allegedly belonged to Charlie Patton, the father of Delta blues, establishing a direct lineage from the genre's origins to Sammie's present. Different cultures call this gift different things. The Irish call their musical mystics Faleed. Africans call them griots. The Choctaw call them firekeepers. Annie's voiceover establishes that this supernatural ability exists across multiple cultures, suggesting Sammie taps into something universal, yet deeply rooted in specific cultural memory. Remmick recognizes this power immediately. He wants to use Sammie's gift to summon his own long-dead Irish ancestors, attempting to rebuild the community colonization destroyed. This explains why Remmick focuses obsessively on turning Sammie rather than simply killing him. Without Sammie's cooperation, Remmick remains cut off from his past, unable to resurrect the culture he lost over a millennium ago. Why didn't the Lord's Prayer work? In the film's most theologically complex scene, Sammie desperately recites the prayer while Remmick holds him underwater in a mock baptism. Traditional vampire lore suggests Christian symbols and prayers should repel the undead, but Remmick remains unaffected. He even joins Sammie in reciting the prayer, explaining that while he hates the men who use Christianity to steal his father's land, the words still bring him comfort as remnants of his past. The most compelling theory about this failure centers on ancestral connection. The mojo bag Annie creates works against the vampires because it stems from Vodun Sinsin, a West African religious practice directly connected to Smoke, Stack, Annie, and Sammie's ancestors. The protection succeeds because it draws on their ancestral power. Christianity, by contrast, was forced upon enslaved Africans by European colonizers. Sammie has no ancestral connection to the Lord's Prayer. His people didn't choose Christianity. It was imposed through violence and cultural erasure. Therefore, when Sammie calls upon Christian protection, he's invoking ancestors who aren't his. The prayer fails because it lacks the ancestral power needed to combat supernatural evil. An alternative interpretation suggests the prayer didn't work because vampires in this world aren't demonic entities subject to holy law. They're cursed beings, disconnected from both heaven and hell, making Christian symbols meaningless to them. If Sammie had been Italian or Irish with generations of Catholic ancestors, the prayer might have worked by tapping into his cultural lineage. But for a young black man in Mississippi in 1932, African spiritual practices hold more power than the religion of his oppressors. Mary is mixed race but passes for white, and her story explores the psychological cost of cultural erasure. Stack convinced her to deny her heritage and embrace whiteness, arguing it would give her opportunities denied to black Americans in Jim Crow Mississippi. Mary grew up close to Stack and Smoke's family, which makes Mary's eventual betrayal even more painful. She abandoned the woman who gave her life and the community that formed her identity, all for the promise of white privilege. When Mary becomes a vampire, her transformation completes the erasure Stack began. The hive mind strips away whatever remained of her individual identity, her personal history, and her connection to her mother's legacy. She becomes part of Remmick's collective, forced to share his ancient Irish memories, while her own cultural heritage disappears entirely. The film presents this as tragedy, not liberation. Mary achieves the colorblind community Remmick promises, but only by ceasing to be Mary. Her 1992 appearance with Stack shows them thriving materially, wearing expensive clothes and moving confidently through the world. But they've lost the warmth and vulnerability they showed before their transformation. They're successful vampires, living in the shadows, unable to walk in daylight or maintain genuine human connections. Mary got the freedom from racism Stack promised, but the price was her entire identity. She's no longer the woman who loved Stack, or the daughter who honored her mother. She's an immortal being wearing Mary's face, carrying Mary's memories, but fundamentally hollowed out. The guitar Sammie carries allegedly belonged to Charlie Patton, and it's more than a prop. Patton, who lived from approximately 1887 to 1934, is widely considered the father of Delta blues. By giving Sammie this specific instrument, Coogler establishes a direct lineage connecting the genre's founding figure to the film's protagonist. The guitar becomes a physical representation of cultural inheritance, literally passing musical tradition from one generation to the next. During Sammie's transcendent performance, the guitar serves as the conduit that allows spirits from past and future to manifest. It's not just Sammie's talent creating this bridge between worlds. It's the combination of his gift and the instrument's historical power. The guitar absorbed decades of music from Patton, and now it channels that accumulated spiritual energy through Sammie's hands. In the film's climax, Sammie smashes the guitar to delay Remmick, destroying the physical object to save himself. This moment represents the sacrifice artists sometimes make, destroying their tools and creations to preserve their lives and freedom. The mid-credits scene, set in 1992, shows elderly Sammie playing a restored guitar, while the post-credits scene cuts back to young Sammie in his father's church, playing This Little Light of Mine on a guitar once more. Whether it's the same instrument repaired or a new one that inherited its spiritual significance remains ambiguous. What matters is that the lineage continues. Sammie rebuilt what was broken, just as Black culture has continuously rebuilt itself after every attempt at destruction. The guitar endures because the tradition it represents cannot be killed. Remmick's first appearance evokes Lucifer's fall from grace. The camera angle makes it appear as though he literally fell from the sky, landing scorched and disoriented on the ground. This visual choice isn't accidental. In biblical mythology, Satan fell from heaven as punishment for rebellion against God, plummeting to earth in flames. Remmick arrives the same way, burned by sunlight, fleeing from Choctaw vampire hunters who've wounded him. The parallel suggests his fall represents more than physical descent. It's moral degradation. Remmick was once part of a legitimate community with its own culture, religion, and traditions. British colonization destroyed everything he knew, and his transformation into a vampire marked his moral fall from victim to perpetrator. He experienced oppression, then chose to inflict the same suffering on others. The fallen angel imagery frames Remmick as a tragic figure who made the wrong choice. He could have died with his people, maintaining his moral integrity even in defeat. Instead, he chose vampirism, becoming the very thing he should have resisted. His 1,000+ years of existence represent an extended fall, each victim dragging him further from whatever humanity or divinity he once possessed. By the time he arrives at Club Juke, he's completely inverted. He promises liberation while delivering enslavement, offers community while destroying individuality, and preaches racial equality while weaponizing his whiteness. Remmick didn't fall from the sky. He's been falling for centuries, and the film captures the moment he finally hits bottom. If you found this worth your time, consider subscribing so you never miss new content. Thanks for watching.